I think one of the most important factors to living a fulfilled life, where you have a contentment, inner joy, peace of mind, is to limit the regrets. And the reason people don't pursue stuff is they live in a world of fear. But again, the counterintuitive nature of life is that go toward what's not natural, what doesn't feel good, instill discomfort in yourself, and good things eventually are going to happen. And I've experienced that numerous times in my life. And you know, I can honestly say that. I mean, I literally have no regrets. I mean, people, I've had surgeries related to all this bodybuilding stuff. People say, why in the world, don't you regret doing that? No, because without the pain and suffering, I wouldn't have the glory. And life's all about glory, achievement.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this podcast of Run With The Cheetahs, your climb to an extraordinary life. This podcast is the companion podcast to the book by the same title, written by Jerry Freishtat. I'm so honored to have him in on these conversations, and we're going to bring him in just a minute. But before we do, let me just say, number one, thank you for joining us. We're so happy you're here. If this is your first time, hope you find the sort of material that you're looking for and that can be helpful for you. And if you're back for more, boy, God bless you. We're so happy that you're here. Good trying to build the group, trying to build the tribe here. So we appreciate it. Now, today we've got a very special day, and I'm going to bring Jerry in here right now. We're going to start talking about what's going to go up today. Jerry, come on in and say hello.
Hey, Russell, how you doing? All
I'm
good
doing
on this
good.
end. It's Halloween week, which is the week of treats, and boy, do we got a treat for today.
We do. We do. Absolutely, we do. I have said in previous podcasts that this chapter that we're talking about today, Embrace the Battle, chapter 14 in your book, is my favorite chapter of the book. And, I actually want to read something right out of your book to get us started this morning, okay? Because today, well, let me back up just a little bit. In last episode, Jerry told his story of his bodybuilding adventure. And there's lots of stories in this book, and there's lots of good stories. But the bodybuilding story is just an amazing story. I know since I read that, I have dropped 6 pounds and added 3 inches to my chest just after reading it. Tremendous. That's results right there, buddy. But the bodybuilding story is fantastic. You really do need to listen to that last episode or get it out of the book. It's tremendous. So today we actually have Jerry's bodybuilding trainer with us. His name is David Johnston. He's an amazing individual. And I want to read something right from the book. This is from Jerry. When I was in my early 50s, I noticed a new trainer at my small gym. You couldn't miss this guy. He was huge, 6'2", 270 pounds, and a little intimidating, with lots of muscle mass and these interesting artistic tattoos. This was no average trainer. He worked with an elite class of experienced weightlifters, and many of them were women. The workouts they were doing made mine look like a walk in the park. I'd been working out for over 30 years at this point, but I didn't look anything like his clients. This was a serious dude. He was almost abusive toward clients who weren't performing to his standards. He didn't care who was in the gym or what anyone else thought. He would get in his clients' faces and make them suffer, or "You need to effing quit." His words. Jerry, this guy is amazing. Before we get him in here, we need to talk a little bit about the Falcons and the Alpha Lions that you talk about in your book. They're the categories of hierarchy above the cheetahs.
Yeah. I mean, most people, in the hierarchy of human beings, when we go all the way from the snakes and sloths, which are the bottom tier, up to the Falcons and Alpha Lions. The Alpha Lions are the innovators. They are the ones that not only execute at the highest level, they kind of reinvent something different than what other people are doing. And when you run into an alpha lion, you have to listen. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, in the public world, in the celebrity type world, the well known people, there's alpha lions, like Tiger Woods in sports. You got Elon Musk and technology. You can go down a list forever. Martin Luther King would be an alpha lion. So but the majority of alpha lions are people who are not necessarily in the limelight. They're behind the scenes, and they just have such a dedicated passion and commitment to what they do and how they do it. And the one thing that you'll notice about all alpha lions is they know they're right. They don't need to question anything. They've done the work, done the homework. Most of them, by the way, and nobody ever sees this, of course, have failed thousands of times on that process to getting to where they're at that level of expertise. And David Johnston, who was my bodybuilding trainer, is in that category. I mean, he's the alpha lion of the bodybuilding industry in the Mid-Atlantic area. He put up several championships. Won a couple of championships himself, which that's another characteristic of an alpha lion. They execute what they preach. And it was just an incredible experience, and you're going to get to hear from the man himself.
Wow, I can't wait. Well, let's get him in here. Let's bring him in here. David, come on in here and say hello to everybody.
Hey, Jerry. Hey, Russell. How you guys doing?
All good.
We're doing great, buddy. Doing great. So glad to have you. Thank you for taking time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, David, before we even start talking, I'm going to show people a couple of pictures of you. They can see you now. You got your beard going. I guess the beards the beards probably weren't happening in the bodybuilding competitions, were they?
That's for the off season when you're trying to get to that next level.
I got you. Well, I tell you what, you guys won't see this, but I'm going to pull up a couple of pictures here and show you a couple of pictures of David. So, David, how tall are you and how much did you weigh during these solo pictures of you?
About 6'1", and my stage weight was usually around 230 pounds at my best. By the very end, it was closer to 250 pounds on stage.
Wow. I mean, this is just amazing stuff. Unbelievable. And then we've got some pictures of some of your team, some of your students. And again, everybody looks pretty happy with what's going on here.
They're happy because the workout's over, so they can finally sigh a breath of relief.
And then, I'm going to, just because I've got these, I'm going to share this with you. This next picture here, this is Jana Freishtat. This is Jerry's wife. And she was actually one of your students, correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah, she did great.
She won the bikini competition in one of the bodybuilding contests, correct?
Yeah, Maryland State Championship, correct.
Well, she's beautiful. She's unbelievable. And that's actually how you got turned on to David, right?
Yeah, well, when I first met David in the gym, it was, he was in there for a good month or so before I really even talked to him. And, but, at that time, Jana's and my schedules were, different, and she couldn't work out with me, and she always liked having a trainer. So, I just approached David one day and said, hey, you have an opening, my wife would love to work with you. And that's how they got started. And then that led to it was like about 3 months after they started when I started.
Wow, very cool. Well, David, we got to start at the beginning for a second here. Tell us, how did you get in and what attracted you to the bodybuilding industry?
Sure. I was overweight my entire childhood. I was just kind of born heavy. My brother and I was, very much genetic. So despite being very active, I was probably the last generation that consistently played outdoors all day, climbing trees, riding bikes. But I was still pretty overweight, and that lasted through my adolescence, into my teens, into early adulthood. And it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good to not be able to do the things that everyone else was doing, whether it was doing pull-ups in gym class or climbing the ropes or being able to run. It was challenging. So I excelled in other ways. I was a musician growing up and did very well academically, but you still kind of have this feeling, gee, I wish I was normal, so to speak. I could, not be teased for my body image and stuff like that. So I also grew up in the late 80s, early 90s when we had a lot of cultural icons that were kind of hyper masculine. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Sylvester Stallone, and so forth. And so I always kind of viewed that with a longing. Someday I'll get in really good shape. Someday, but I didn't know how to do it. Back then, it wasn't like the current era where there's gym culture on social media everywhere you turn. So it was kind of this secret formula, if you will. How do you get to that point? And I tried a couple times in my teens, did some casual strength training, took a strength training class at school and so forth. But, I'd invest a lot of effort for a month or two and not really get very far with it. And so I would quit. When you work out hard and you don't see results, it's kind of like going to a job and not getting a paycheck. It's difficult to keep putting in the effort without the return. And so, I went to college. I was very academic. I have a degree in philosophy. And by the end of that, I felt very accomplished academically. Brain was firing on all cylinders, but I was probably in the worst physical shape from eating college food and sitting around and studying all day. So that was when I kind of said, all right, it's time to figure this out. You've always said you're going to do it. You're in your mid-20s. It's not going to get easier. You kind of need a lifestyle change now. And so I invested a lot of energy over the course of a year, just studying as much as I could and trying to learn between the exercise physiology and the nutrition, what is required to really transform your body. Got started from there.
Wow. So that's what people do with philosophy degrees. They get, no, I just love that. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we had a brief phone call last week, and you were talking about how you tend to be a little bit of an extremist. I mean, once you get in on something, you go in deep. You had your music on one side of the room, which was the drums, and you had your weights on the other, but the weights won out, and you pursued that with vigor.
Yeah. I've kind of been that way my whole life. When I do something, the fun in it is seeing how far I can take it, and really being dedicated to it. So when I started training, I wasn't really sure. I had a good idea of what was required to go from A to B, but just because you know how to do it doesn't mean you enjoy it, right? So I kind of left that door open. If I got involved after 6 months and I wasn't really enjoying it, I could give myself that out if need be. And once I started, it bit me. I was bitten by the bug. It definitely was something where I didn't have to be convinced to do it. I looked forward to doing it, every day.
Jerry, we're going to get into perhaps after we let David go later, we're going to talk about his ability to focus, like he was just talking about. You actually talk about being obsessed sometimes. There come times in your life, there are seasons, is what I call them, where you really do dig in so deep and lean into something with all you got. And it's important. It's important to be able to do that. I know you talk about being obsessed sometimes. I think it's a great conversation.
One of the most important things that people need to realize is that I mean, nobody's ever achieved anything with this, fictional balanced life, right? The Grant Cardone quote, obsession is a gift, not a disease. And if you go back and look, and especially in the category where David is in the Alpha Lion group, they're all like that, all common characteristic. Every single one of them at some point is all in, all obsessed. And I'm not talking about for a month or two. Most of these trip periods could be for, years of time. And then when they're finished with that, they might move into a little bit of balance for a while, but eventually it's on to the next one.
Yeah.
And that's the characteristic.
Wow. So, David, you get yourself pretty fit. You've graduated from college. You're looking good. What moved you forward into both your personal training program, as well as your bodybuilding?
So after college, I knew that I needed to use my body. I could just tell. I was very academic, but I was also very physical, and finding that balance can be hard. So I actually got a job working, manual labor as a furniture mover, which is back-breaking work, seasonal, so you're working all the hours they can give you. And started to naturally build some muscle and lose some of the college fat just from doing that. And that's when I said, okay, it's time to learn how to do this. So I was continuing to work as a furniture mover while learning how to get in shape and then starting my own journey. And at first, my coworkers would goad me a little bit, like, taking a break and eating tuna fish and just walking my own path. Anytime you walk your own path, you're going to catch a lot of flack for it, right? Not being a sheep.
Right.
And then, but after 6 months, it was starting to really show in my physique. And all of a sudden, some of my coworkers would ask, "Hey, you think I can come home and work out with you?" And I started helping my mother. I started helping my brother, just people in my vicinity. When you're fit, you wear your resume, right? So everybody wants to talk to you about it and ask you questions. You can't go anywhere without being asked 47 questions, right? So I just started naturally helping people that I was close to. And after a while of that, and I was good at it. I was good at, helping people to get from A to B. And after a while, I said, people make money doing this. They get paid to do this instead of backbreaking physical labor. Maybe I need to look into that as a career change. So started studying, became a certified personal trainer. And it just so happened at my first gym that I worked at, I wasn't planning to compete in bodybuilding because at that point, it hadn't even registered as a possibility per se. But a couple of my coworkers were competitive bodybuilders. And I, of course, just looked up to them, try to pick up whatever tips and tricks that I could and kind of keep my mouth shut and my eyes open, ears open. And when I started at that gym, I dieted down and got very, very lean just to do it, to learn the process. And plus it helps with some advertising, if you will. And they kind of invited me into the fold. They said, "Wow, you think you want to compete? You'd be good at this." I said, thought hadn't occurred to me, but they kind of planted that seed. So from there, I knew I needed a little bit longer. Bodybuilding is it's a long-term endeavor. It's not something where you train for 6 months and you're ready to conquer the world. It can take several years. But it allowed me to strategically start planning my training so that over the course of the next year and a half, I would be ready to get up there and do my first show, and jumped in from there and never looked back. I think I did 16 shows over 9 years and just loved the process.
And you are still training people online today, is that correct?
Yeah, I mostly work with people virtually. I do once in a while, I'll come down and train my online clients in person for a week, or even this weekend, one of my clients traveled to stay with me, and we hit a couple different gyms and kind of made a weekend out of it. But yeah, I still coach people. I've been doing it for 22 years now.
Wow. Well, we're going to put all your socials and web address and everything in the show notes here so that anyone that wants to pursue some tough training with David Johnston, they'll have the access to you. That's just fantastic. So, Jerry, your experience was life-changing. I mean, this man literally changed your life, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you don't know that going into it. It's like anything else, whatever you go set some type of goal. The first step is that the probably the biggest thing I learned was, I've always been somebody who, tell me you can't do it, and I'm like, bring it on, right? Let's go. But sometimes, even though you have that mentality, you don't know what you don't know. And I had no idea what I was up against. David tried to explain it to me, but you can't figure it out until you're in the midst of it. But when I made the commitment, and along with the great coaching I had from David in the psychology side of it, of everything, I decided I'm doing this no matter what. And there was one period when I was, getting ready for my first show. I mean, I was like halfway through, and I literally called David and I said, "David, I think I'm going to die." I literally, and by the way, his response is exactly what just happened. He just laughed at me. So
Well, it's because I've been there
yeah,
myself.
yeah,
So.
right, yeah. I mean, and that's how hard it is, but that's for the people, by the way, that actually do it. You
Yep.
know, most people, and it took me years to understand this in the bodybuilding world, there's very few people that follow it exactly. Every single calorie, every single bite, when you're supposed to eat, how you're supposed to eat. One of the things David told me at the very beginning is, he goes, I don't care how hard it is, you're going to finish everything. So if you're doing cardio and it's a bad day, you're up, you're there with no carbs, your body's, need your brain's starved for fats. I finished, now some days that was literally, walking at the end or whatever, but
Yep.
so the experience, and this is what happens to, I think, anybody that goes through something like that. And by the way, this was by choice. I put myself through that. Most people experience this not by choice. Something
Right.
really bad happens to them in their life. And but you find out that you are capable of way more than what you think you are. And then that transcended in every other aspect of my life. Every area of my life got better from the experience of bodybuilding.
That's fantastic. Well, William James, who's considered the father of modern day psychology, one of his quotes, and I don't have it in front of me to be exact, but he basically says that human beings operate or perform at about 60% of their potential.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I mean,
people just don't even know how much more they can do because they're never committed and push themselves to that point.
yeah, David Goggins gets into that in his book "Can't Hurt Me." And by the way, that's a great book. Anybody out there listening needs to read that book if you're serious about improving and making significant improvements in your life. But he has this term called callousing your mind, and when you wake up every day and you go through the regular routine of being comfort and and everything else, you're really not making any progress in the development of yourself and your what you can be and what you can develop. You have to get past that point of pain and put yourself into that point of pain and suffering, to where you're discovering things about yourself that you didn't know that you could do. And you need to do that consistently. It's not once a week I'm going to go run an extra 200 yards on my jog. It's the type of thing where, no, I'm going to go run an extra couple miles on my jog, right? And you got to battle
Well, I just happen to have a David Goggins quote here. Now, by the way, David Goggins,
that.
probably many people I'm sure know him. He's everywhere these days. Quite a unique individual. Here's a quote from him. I love this. It says, "A lot of us don't know about another world that exists for us because it's on the other side of suffering. That's the real growth in life." David Goggins. Uh, the other day, uh, David, when we were talking, I was trying to get the word suffering out of you, but you actually preferred modest discomfort.
Yeah. Or moderate discomfort. And
I'm sorry, moderate
well,
discomfort. I thought,
Jerry, one of the things that Jerry just said, I think is really worth focusing on. One of the biggest challenge with a bodybuilding lifestyle or a prep is that it is chosen. You volunteer for it.
Yep.
So if you're in a situation, you're in a third world nation, or your family is destitute or whatever, and you have to be hungry, that's not fun. That's challenging. But when you choose to be hungry and at any moment, like, I don't feel great, and there's food right in that cabinet, and the only thing preventing it is my choice, right? And you're choosing to walk into the fire repeatedly, for days and days and weeks and months on end, right? And it
wow.
starts to wear you down and wear you down and wear you down, right? But that on the other side of that, there's ascension, if you will, call it enlightenment. Jerry's talking about learning stuff about yourself that you didn't know, and in the moment, it seems almost on the cusp of, I can't take any more, I can't handle this. But as soon as it's done and you get a couple days of freedom, you look back at it as, some of the greatest times of your life, because it was your, to use a cliche, it was your calling to greatness. You saw what you could handle, and you saw that you could walk through it, and and be successful. And that teaches you it creates that resilience and calluses the mind, as so
Wow.
many other things do. But yeah,
It becomes part of your inner core
right.
that you carry that to every other aspect of your life. But here's even more important: you carry it forever.
Mhm.
Those experiences that are that difficult and that hard and that involve deep suffering,
Yep.
they don't leave you, and I mean they don't leave you in a good way.
Yep. Well, best example, Jerry, about 3 years ago, I started this path being diagnosed with certain neurological conditions, and it was very challenging. Chronic pain, didn't know what was going on, felt like I was going to be paralyzed. And there's a lot of fear with that and a lot of suffering with that. Your mind is racing, what's going to come, what's going to be. And then at a certain point, I just had to go back into that, flipping the switch, so to speak. I know who I am. I know where I've been and what I've done and what I'm capable of. And what's going to happen is going to happen. All I can choose is how I face it, right? And just kind of dredging up those 16 contest preps and everything I've been through. Okay, this is just one more dance. Here we
Yep.
go.
There you go.
Well, because we were talking about food and the diet and being hungry, and man, I could go for a egg McMuffin right now. Just kidding. I want to read one more excerpt from your book, Jerry, because this is just fantastic. It's about the diet and it's also about David. The bodybuilding prep diet is a biological, scientific approach on the way to reducing body fat and maintaining muscle mass to create the optimal body for the stage. It takes a seasoned expert who has been in the trenches for years to design, implement, and manage the process. David looked at his clients like a piece of art that he was creating. Each human body reacts differently, and David was a pro at adapting to the results. He based it on a detailed analysis of weekly check in numbers and weekly photos to monitor the progress, adjusting as necessary. And once again, I'm just saying, David, that's elite skill and talent right there, my man. That is what an artist. You're an
Thank you.
artist. Wow.
Thank you. Well, yeah, and that was the fun part of bodybuilding. There's a science to it and there is an art to it. And being able to step back and realize all of this work culminates in a finalized product, right? Where you're creating this work of art.
You're quite the artist with making these people look the way they look, and I just commend you for it. I think that's fantastic. But I do want to now dig in a little bit to your training method. So, it sounds like you're pretty much a hard ass, my man. Sounds like you're pretty sounds like you're pretty tough on these people. That's the way to success?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. The best thing I can say here, when I started working as a personal trainer, even though it's your job to get people in shape, it's a sales driven field. Fitness is always sales, sales, sales. You're selling people a dream, right? And it's based on a lot of very personal things, how they feel about their body image. There's a lot of emotion imbued in that. And as you know, anytime you're in sales, you're never supposed to say no. You're supposed to be agreeable and, oh yeah, we can do that. We can make that happen. So as a trainer, there's a little conflict there, because realistically, to get someone in shape, there has to be a certain power structure. You have to be the one kind of in charge, leading the charge, carrying them through hell and telling them no quite a bit, right? But at the same time, it's easy to lose their business. So when I started as a trainer, I was probably a little too agreeable because I was green and I was nervous about offending somebody. But over time, I saw like that's what most trainers were doing, and it wasn't working. They were too concerned with being their clients' friends. They were too concerned with being the nice guy, the sounding board, the therapist. And we wear all of those hats as well. But first and foremost, you kind of need to be the general, the one leading the charge, so to speak. And that means, putting people into that state of mild discomfort over and over and over and showing them what they are capable of. Because for most people, it's going to be foreign. So sticking with very basic, repetitious movements and just getting better at them, perfecting them. There's not as much gloss when it comes to that. There's no 6 minute abs, right? Selling people consistency over time. That's a hard sell because it's not fancy, it's not colorful,
Yeah.
but it's effective, right? So being very authentic with people and kind of being willing to stand your ground and continue to tell them. When I started training, like I said, I was a little too agreeable. I hated it. So I actually quit working as a trainer, went back into manual labor, and then got headhunted at a different gym to become a trainer. And the second time I did it, I made some promises to myself, one of which was I wasn't going to train any of my clients any differently than I would train my mom. Like I'm going to be just as forthright, just as honest. No sales tactics, no BS, right?
Well, Jerry, I mean, I hear David sounding all nice and compassionate, but I've heard some of your stories. I mean, and this is a guy that you don't say no to and you don't argue with. I mean, when he tells you to do something, you do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best comparison here is just recently I saw this where they were interviewing Nick Saban, and the reporter goes, you kind of have a reputation for being pretty tough on people. And Saban's response to that was, he goes, I don't think that's really fair to categorize it like that. He goes, we have certain standards
Mm.
that people need to be held to, and different players require different tactics to maintain those standards. And that's what David was great at. I can, people that were, I use Jana, my wife, for example, she was not a hardcore trained, athlete when she started with David, but she also listened, didn't
Mm.
complain, and did the work. So he saw the potential in the progress of what was going on there. So I think that, and then on the other side of it, I saw David with some clients that want to do their own thing. They're not listening. They're not doing the reps correctly. They want to quit early. And I've seen him with discussions with people, who are cheating on their diets, because you can't lie to a pro, right? You can't get away with it, right? He knew. And so I saw a lot of those conversations. So David, to conclude this, the bottom line is that there's a standard.
Yep.
If you want to make it to that stage, and he's going to hold you to that standard. And if you refuse to come up to that standard, it's, go find another trainer. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't make it work for you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I tell people all the time, like I'm a good trainer, but I'm not a magician. I'm not a wizard, right?
Yeah.
That's too bad.
I I enforce the rules, but I don't set the rules.
So when Jerry started seeing all these incredibly shaped bodies, and he's saying, "Man, I've been working out for 30 years and I don't look like this." And again, I know I want to point out that I went to David's website, and there's a picture of Jerry. There's a picture of Jerry before and after. And the before, as you pointed out, Jerry, you've been working out for 30 years with that before
Yeah.
picture. But when
Yeah,
you look
yeah.
at that before picture compared to that after picture when you won the state champion in your category, what a difference. What a difference.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, no, I just want to say that, it gets back to what I said before. You don't know what you don't know. I'm just
yeah,
assuming that, I'm reading Muscle and Fitness magazine, and I'm just thinking, oh man, I just got to do more reps. I got to go to the gym more often. I got to move more weight. I got to do whatever, but no one ever sat down with me and said, hey, Big Macs don't work.
Right.
Drinking on the weekends doesn't work.
Yeah.
Lifestyle, it's a bodybuilding is a 24/7 nonstop recurring effort. And
Yep.
that's the difference between that and other like, goals and things that you do. It does the dieting part doesn't leave you until that show is over. So you suffer the 24/7. It doesn't go away.
Yep.
wow. So Jerry gets excited and he starts thinking, man, I see all these pictures on the wall of people that you've trained and they've gotten up on stage and they look good. what would it take to do that? You know, and one of the things you said to him was that, look, this is hard stuff. To go
Yep.
down that road. Of all the people that attempt to do it, 90% fail. Only 10% make it. David, I'm sure that somebody who's already in the gym working out and thinks they want to go down that road, I don't think these are weak-willed people to begin with. But what is
No.
the difference between the 10% that make it and the 90% that just cannot?
I mean, I think there's multiple things that go into it. A lot of it is being willing to plan and really look at your life and every aspect of your life. And you can't approach this haphazardly. It requires a high degree of organization, planning, preparation. But again, a lot of it is that willingness to kind of walk into the fire. I would say the 10% who get there are that 10% who find some joy in the difficulty, right? Certain people see difficulty and suffering, if you will, as just a giant threat that they if it starts to present itself, they have to run away and flee. Society has bred them, to chase comfort at all costs. And there is that 10% that sees the thrill of challenging themselves over and over and over. And with that, are not willing to break down and give up and quit. And even everybody has a moment, a time they cheat on the diet, or they give a half-hearted effort in a workout, and that's real life. It happens. But when it happens, can you brush that dust off and just immediately get back on the horse, or do you let it defeat you, right? So having that willingness to even sit with emotional discomfort. Nobody likes when they fail at the diet. Nobody likes when they have a bad workout, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen to everybody. When it happens, can you process it and just keep moving forward?
That's great. That's great stuff. Fantastic. Although, Jerry, I don't think you cheated, did you? You're pretty hardcore yourself.
There's cheating and there's cheating. The cheating I'm talking about is that you're manipulating.
Right.
You're lying on your check-ins. And the second you do that, by the way, what this gets back to everything else in life. What good are you doing for yourself, right?
Right.
If you can't be true with yourself, but when David will attest to this, it's exactly what he just said. Everybody. Once you get to the point where your brain is starved for carbs and fats, it comes the suffering comes in waves, right? So every now and then, this happened to me probably 4 or 5 times during the whole prep, where you get to a point of desperation that you have to eat something. I don't know how to say how to explain that without somebody experiencing what that is, but it's a slow starvation process. And so, but when that happens, what's the plan? David gave me the plan in advance. He knew
Right.
that was going to happen, right? So what happens? Okay, I'm going to eat a half a protein bar. That's not something on my plan. Okay, I'm going to have 1 extra or 2 extra tablespoons of peanut butter on some celery. That's not part of the plan. So technically, is that cheating because it's not written in your plan? Yeah, but when you plan for
Damage control.
the damage, you then it's just it does become part of the plan.
Right.
But you can't let that get away from you, because the second you eat one thing that you're not supposed to eat, your desire to go get something else is goes up tenfold.
Or no different, let's say by the end of a prep, you're doing an hour of cardiovascular work every day.
Yeah, that's right.
And you always hit a point where it's almost impossible to push at normal intensity. It's impossible to get your heart rate up, and you'll have a few workouts like that. And I would always tell Jerry, when that's the case, I want you to still put in your time. We're slow the treadmill down to a crawl if need be, but don't get off of it. Because as soon as you give yourself that out, it's easy to give yourself the out another time and another time and another time. So you have to be principled about this. And Even if it's not the most effective cardio session, that's okay, right? Put in your time, watch a podcast, watch something on YouTube, pass the time, and then you'll go home and you'll know like you legitimately did your best and you didn't fail at it, right?
Yeah, and this is also an area we should just talk about how action precedes motivation. I mean, when you start something like this, the reason everybody quits on their New Year's resolution or whatever, any project, anything they want, the reason they quit in the first, few hours or first few days or first few weeks is because there's no results, right? And so the disciplined action, you have to stick with that long enough to
Yeah,
start seeing some results, and then the motivation kicks in. There
right,
wasn't a single day, I'm just telling you, there was not a single day, and David probably can attest to this for everybody. I didn't want to quit. It wasn't like you wake up one day, it's like, oh, not too bad today. No,
right,
every single day. But once you get halfway and all of a sudden you start looking good and hey, I might get on the stage. This is actually happening.
yeah,
Then the tolerance of the mental side becomes a little easier to deal with.
right,
I don't want to step out of my zone too far here, okay? But I want to remind people that the title of this book, Run with the Cheetahs, the subtitle is Your Climb to an Extraordinary Life. And Jerry, you say if you want an extraordinary life, you're going to have to pursue exceptional things.
Yep.
And that is so important to note for people here. You can have a successful life, you can have a happy life, and not have to suffer all of this discomfort we're talking about. But if you want to pursue exceptionalism, you're gonna have to reach, you're gonna have to push, you're gonna have to reach, and you're most likely gonna have to suffer some of this moderate discomfort that David talks about in order to get past where you are today. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to let David talk about this too, but I mean, I just, this gets back to that entire process of not having regret, and people that want to do multiple things. And again, I'm not just talking about physical stuff. Could be anything in your life, that you have a dream, you have a vision. I could have done this, I should have done that. And but and that process goes with you your entire life. When you get my age now, I'm 65. Most of those people, and I'm going to say just about all those people, have regrets. And I think one of the most important factors to living a fulfilled life, where you have a contentment, inner joy, peace of mind, is to limit the regrets. So, and the reason people don't pursue stuff is they live in a world of fear, and but again, the counterintuitive nature of life is that go toward what's not natural, what doesn't feel good, um, instill discomfort in yourself, and good things eventually are going to happen. And I've experienced that numerous times in my life, and you know, I can honestly say that. I mean, I literally have no regrets. I mean, people, I've had surgeries related to all this bodybuilding stuff. People say, why in the world, don't you regret doing that? No, because without the pain and suffering, I wouldn't have the glory. And life's all about glory, achievement.
100%.
David, go ahead, David. Excuse me.
No, I mean, I pretty much echo everything Jerry just said. I've told many clients, family, my whole life, the reason that I work as hard as I do, get away from bodybuilding, it was no different in school and academia. It was no different with my personal training business. I know to this day of all the people in my phone, I know how busy Jerry is, and I know if I call him, he's going to pick it up. Most people don't do that. And I'm the
Yeah.
same way. He knows if he reaches out to me, he's going to hear back right away. And I work that hard at everything that I do because I have to live in this body and I have to live with me. The external reward is nice. The existential benefits, making money, having nice stuff, having nice physique. But the spirit and the mentality of knowing who you are, knowing you're that person who's, when somebody needs something, they call me, right? When they really need help and they can't figure out where to go, I'm the one to lean on. Um, Over time, that builds that mindset and that spirit where you don't have regrets because you know what you've done, you know what you're capable of, you know who you are, right? And I think a lot of people hide from who they could be because, oh, I don't want the discomfort of this 10-minute phone call. I don't want the discomfort of going over everything one last time before I go to bed. I just want to get to bed, and just continually putting your nose to the grindstone and being willing to do that little extra bit makes you who you are.
That's wonderful. Wonderful stuff. Well,
Yep.
we record these episodes ahead of time. And this episode is probably not going to air until sometime in December. And as we look ahead to January 1st, we have that annual New Year's resolution event that is so important to so many people everywhere. Now,
Yep.
for me, I can start a new resolution any afternoon or any morning I want to. But some people they like to wait till that New Year's resolution time.
Yep.
David, as someone who has seen people set goals, work towards them, drop off of them, what would you say to somebody who's looking at New Year's resolutions, wants to set a new goal for themselves? What would you say a couple of the most important things they could do for themselves would be?
Um, I got some good stuff here for you here.
Okay.
First of all, start 2 days before New Year's Day,
Right.
right? Meaning, like every time I started a prep, I never started on New Year's Day. I always started 2 days beforehand because it's just psychological. It gave me the edge of knowing everybody's out trying to get in their last hurrah. I'm already at work,
I love it.
right? I
Love
just
it.
want
That's
that
great.
little bit of extra. Second thing you can do, it's funny. I still coach people for a living, and I always say November, December, I wish I could almost just like go on sabbatical for 2 months because getting people to stick to a plan through the holiday season, it's it's an uphill battle. The reality is our society is built a certain way. We have a lot of celebrations during this 2 month stretch. So at most, you're trying to keep people to get them to maintain and not regress. Positive progression is difficult. But even with that said, anytime I would start a prep, let's say I know I'm starting January 1st, I spend that whole month prior, roughly a month, pre-prepping. And that's getting my head right, right? So like laying the scene for the battle, if you will. I would always order a new lunchbox from Amazon, sparkly new lunchbox. I could carry all my meals. I would order a new training journal that had fresh pages. I'm excited to open it. I might even predate the pages. So Monday, January 1st, Tuesday, January 2nd. Get a calendar on the wall and mark the weeks out. Put together music playlists for me to train to. And I would do all of this preparation because none of that is the actual dieting or the training. It's rather the things that I need in place to be as successful as possible with the dieting and the training. So I'm doing a pre-prep, right? Getting my head straight, getting my environment settled so that the minute we start, a lot of time when people start a process, they start and they stumble, they start and they stumble. There's a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of starting and stumbling. And when you stumble, it's really hard to regain that momentum. And if you start doing that week after week after week, it becomes self-defeating, right? Where
Yes.
anything that's repetitious becomes a pattern. So if you're failing and failing and failing, that's not a good place to be. But if you've kind of done your homework before day one, there's a lot less reasons to stumble. There's a lot less reasons to fail. So
No.
you have to almost go into it excited. That's part of the problem is people go into an endeavor like this knowing that it's going to be huge, a huge amount of effort and energy and suffering and all these things, and they dread it. And you can't go into it dreading it. You have to almost fool yourself, trick yourself that you're excited to do this thing while everyone else is having their last drink. You're already excited because you're ahead of the game, right? And if you can do that and get your head and spirit right before you start, you're going to be way ahead of the pack.
Yeah,
Damn,
what you
damn,
just
that's good stuff.
described, yeah, that's awesome. What you just described is what I call the commitment process. And there's another thing that I like to tell younger people that, a goal without a commitment is just a dream.
Mhm.
And if by everything you described about preparing a month in advance, all that's part of the commitment process.
Sure.
And it reinforces the commitment, So and again, people starting out may have never made a commitment like this before, so you're going to have to apply some serious discipline, to execute, when you're beginning something like this. But after you do it 3, 4, 5 times, even if you fail at it, you learn the process, come back to it. And what David said earlier, get up, start again, get up,
Yep.
start again. That's the key.
I think you used the term damage control at one point as well. Know
Sure.
know that it's going to be tough. When you slip, deal with it.
Yeah.
Understand it. Get
Yeah.
This is such good stuff. So, on this commitment thing, David, I got to tell you, a couple of episodes ago, I announced that I was working on a new habit, and Jerry cut me off mid sentence and said, "No, no, no. We either do or we don't. We're
Right.
not trying a new habit." It was hilarious. I loved
Yeah.
it. I might celebrate with a little extra peanut butter on my celery. But
There you go.
David, I can't tell you how wonderful it's been to have you with us today. Jerry, do you have some other things you'd like to ask David or have him share?
No, I mean, I think that, he's a rare breed, right? And it's just been an absolute privilege that I ran into it. I mean, I think the thing I'd like to say is that, the biggest lesson that I think people need to learn, is you got to show up, right? If I wasn't at the gym on a regular basis, would I have met David? Right. And the impact that, that it has, and then on top of that, I will say, even though I was quite a bit older than David, he was intimidating. He was intimidating. And I actually said in my book that, like, I think the first month he never even said hello to me or anything. I'm there like every day. And so it took a little gumption for me to approach him about training Jana, because I didn't even know if he was available, or, and Jana was not a bodybuilder at the time. So, and everybody he was training was, pretty elite. And, but, then to, as is most of the time, your irrational thoughts and irrational fears. 2 minutes after I start talking with David, he's the nicest guy in the world, and we get along great and hit it off, and everything went tremendous. So, you got to show up, got to face your fears, and most of all, ask a lot of questions. I
Yep.
mean, when you get someone like David, and it doesn't matter what field they're in, but for him it's bodybuilding. It's somebody such a high level expertise, like Russell, for you in marketing. You need to ask questions, and that's the only avenue. And I'm just amazed at how many people are just so fearful of, like, looking stupid, or I don't know. Anybody that's a professional at what they do, they know you don't know, right? And if they're good at what they do, they're going to embrace the fact that you're looking for education and want to help you.
Right.
The perfect place to land with all of this is the title of this chapter is Embrace the Battle. And Jerry, for me, it's become my mantra. Your line is learn to love the battle. You'll learn to love the results.
Yep.
I think that's how you say it. Are those your words? Or it's very close.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And what that is gets back to what we talked about. No regrets. I mean, the only way you're going to achieve anything at an elite level is to go to battle. I mean, that's it. And most people never take that step to even entertain the battle, more or less dive into it. You have to have the thought process. You got to set the dream, the goal, the commitment, get engaged. And like I said, most of the time, no matter how hard it is, if you stick with it, get through that first 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is, whatever project, whatever, all of a sudden, the second those results start happening, even though the work's still that hard, it becomes tolerable. So when you start getting the results, you learn to love the battle.
And David, you had said, get excited about the battle. And if you're dreading it, you're already got one foot in the trench. You get
Yep.
excited about the battle. Jerry,
Yeah.
I said it in the last episode, I've adopted embrace the battle as my new mantra. It is certainly working for me as I've got several battles that I'm working right now and I'm feeling great about them. I
Awesome.
encourage everybody to adopt that as a mantra and move forward in their life and tackle some of these, do some of the hard things, do some of the hard things and see that you can do them.
I always say it's similar to embrace the battle, but for me, the phrase is do the work. People are afraid to do the work, and they view it as a punishment rather than a privilege. And at a certain level, life is work. Life is the battle,
Yeah.
and you're blessed to be able to fight that battle until you're not. So go to war and do the work every day and just keep getting better.
I love it. David, we're gonna let you go now, but I want to thank you so very much for your time. What a pleasure to meet you and speak with you and be able to share your knowledge and expertise with our people that are listening. But thank you so much, and we will be in touch with you again, I'm sure. Happy New Year to you, and good luck in anything you're doing.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Russell. And
Yeah.
Jerry, it's always a pleasure anytime we get to chop it up. I love doing it.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And hope to have you back on in the future.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Jerry, I think we want to dig back in here on this commitment thing. There's so many different levels of commitment. I mean, you take it, you've got it the real deal. I mean, you get in deep. But some people say, "Yeah, I'm going to do this," and there's no real commitment. They're not really promising themselves they're going to do anything.
Yeah. Well, it's all founded in human nature, right? Go back, 500 years ago, you had no choice but to be committed, right? So, along with the world of abundance and everything we've built and, with the higher brain that we have today and everything else, that comfort factor comes into place, which makes making commitments, way harder because our natural process is to uh, do less, not more.
Yeah.
And so, from a human nature standpoint, you have to battle that because the internal growth that you get, and as I said earlier about contentment, peace of mind, all the things that make us feel secure are counterintuitive to comfort. So, those commitments, are critically important to constantly put yourself in that situation because the more you commit to, the more you execute, the more you get done. It's just simple, the better you feel.
Wow. What a fabulous session. What a fabulous session. And he was just amazing. So glad that you introduced me and our listeners to him. Wow. Well, I think
Yep.
that's probably ought to wrap up for today. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you that these conversations, we're trying to put them out every 2 weeks. So we'd love it if you'd subscribe or at least check in with us from time to time. There's not going to be any sequence to this that you have to be in. All of these are pretty much self contained conversations that we hope help move you where you want to go. The book is the same way. You literally can pick up that book and dive in from any chapter. It's a fabulous book. I highly recommend the book and or the audiobook. David, it was a pleasure to see you. Jerry, always good to talk with you, my friend. You have yourself a great day and talk to you soon.
See you guys.